well, my goal is actually better. My goal is no longer to have this perfect home. My goal is to make this space better, which means I can literally throw away one thing and I have been successful. I cannot fail at better if I do anything at all. That's a huge mindset change. I didn't make that mindset change until I started the process and saw, oh, okay, I am doing something teeny tiny and it makes an impact, which then impacts my mindset, which then makes me willing to do more, which then makes me get away from this whole, I've got to set aside, 3 weeks or 5 years or whatever to change my house. And I'm like, oh no, I can make it better right now. Then my house actually started to change.
Hey guys, my name is Shayla. Welcome to the Hey Shayla Podcast. I went from full-time travel to full-time new COVID mom, and now I'm a mom of 2. And holy wow, is motherhood and adulting a learning curve. There are so many decisions we need to make and a million ways to do it right. I created this podcast to interview some of my gurus to share their knowledge and empower you on your journey. Let me be your guinea pig and ask the questions you think everyone else knows. Here, we're a little hippie. We try to do things as naturally as possible. We're open-minded, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. But above all, we support one another and work to find what works. If you're into it, you're our people. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to the Hey Shayla Podcast. Today I have Dana White on the show. She is a decluttering expert and is the creator of the 5-step No Mess Decluttering Method. Dana shares realistic home management strategies and messages of hope in her books, Organizing for the Rest of Us, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. And the book I read and how I found you is Decluttering at the Speed of Life, which is also a Wall Street Journal bestseller. Dana teaches her strategies on her blogs, podcasts, and videos, aslobcomesclean.com, and trains coaches in her unique decluttering process at declutteringcoaches.com. You can find her at a slob comes clean everywhere, which makes it so easy on your Instagram, on your website, on your YouTube.
Not Pinterest. I don't know why when I signed up for Pinterest, it wouldn't let me do a slob comes clean. I don't know why. Like
that is so bizarre.
I don't really do anything with Pinterest though. Yeah. I think it's like Noni loves, because I used to call myself Noni, short for anonymous, back in the day when I first got started. And this was my deep, dark secret,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because when you get started, you're like, no, I don't want anyone I know to find this.
Like nobody. I still don't tell people I know.
That's so funny. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I told my sister, I'm like, it's so fun when I get interview authors. I just feel like they're legit celebrities. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she said yes. I'm going to talk to her. This is so exciting. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah. And like I said, I found your book. Actually, somebody in one of my YouTube comments recommended your book because I was talking about how I was trying to be minimal. And because I was a full-time traveler and I used to live with just a backpack. And so now I look around my house and I'm like, how
did this happen?
How do I have so many things? Yeah. And so I think I read Goodbye Things. And it was about like a single 30-year-old man who had no things. And I was like, oh, this is too much. And so someone recommended your book, and you are me. We are speaking the same language here. And it was so helpful. So
I'm glad.
I want to know how did you get to be the expert of decluttering?
I mean, it's as much of a surprise to me as it is to anyone. I think it's the biggest surprise to my mother, for sure. She still laughs about it on a daily basis, I think. No, I had no intention of this being the thing that I talked about, but I wanted to be a writer. Like that was my goal. And I wanted a creative outlet and I enjoyed writing. And I was like, okay, I think this is the thing I want to do when I have kids. But I didn't know how to make that happen. This was back in the olden days, 2009, and so blogs were really big at the time. I feel like I missed out on the 2007 get started blog thing, but I didn't even know what they were until 2008. Like that was it. But I found out what they were. I was like, this is what I need to do. I want to be a writer. But my house was a disaster. And so I had this really creative idea to write about motherhood. I was like, who does that? Right. Like
this is a novel idea.
Right. Yeah. So I I mean, honestly, that's kind of still what I write about, right? Like about, my home and stuff like that. But
Totally.
I feared that even if I wrote about motherhood, but then people found out what house looked like, they would be like, oh my word, like, and I'm one of those people, I'd rather just not say anything than try to, like, I'm not a, um, I have a hard time being fake. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's like, I was like, I've got to get my house under control. And now I had this other, like, I wanted to write, and my house was keeping me from doing that. And I'd always struggled, like my entire life, I had struggled in my house. And, then I was like, okay, I'm going to write about that as a practice thing, like as a temporary practice thing. That's why I had the fake name, because I had literally no intention of this being the thing I wrote about. I was like, I can learn about blogging, which is the thing I want to do, but also motivate me to focus on my house. And here we are, how many years later, 13 years, 14 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really ultimately came down to the fact that, first of all, I realized this is an actual legitimate struggle for me. This is not something where I just hadn't paid enough attention. Now I know what to do. I'm good for the rest of my life. That's just not my story. This is an actual legitimate struggle for my personality type, which is actually a big thing that I've learned, is that most people who write about this stuff are very different from me. And so that's why their, traditional organizing advice made no sense to me. I was always like, what?
Yeah.
Your before pictures are like, I'd be so great with that being my after picture, I'm like,
well, I remember reading in your book, you were talking about how you were trying to sell things on eBay. And so you were bringing things into your house, and that you would like some of the walls were lined with boxes. And I was really getting the feeling, I listened to the book, so I could hear it, but I was getting this like overwhelmed, lots of stuff everywhere. And it was making me anxious. And you were like, this is my reality. I'm not just like, oh, I've always loved organizing and I've loved things being tidy, and I'm going to teach you why I love that. You were in the thick of it, and you were like, okay.
No, it was legit.
Yeah.
Like, this is my legitimate struggle. And so I realized it wasn't something that was just like, okay, it's done, I'm fixed. But also the thing that surprised me the most was finding out that other people struggled too. Like, I truly thought I am the one person in the world, and let's just say it honestly, the one woman in the world who doesn't get this. Because it seemed like every other woman in the whole world was like, duh, what's the big deal? Like, I've got it. And for me, I was like, okay, I can never tell anybody how bad this is. People knew it was bad. They did not know how bad it was,
Well, yeah, because when people come over to your house, you clean. You're going to pick up so that it's presentable. So even if you go to other people's houses, you're like, this is how you live? You're like, if you had been here an hour ago, you would have known what this is like.
But mine was so bad, I couldn't even, like, I had to have 2 weeks notice to have people over. Like, I would shove everything in the master bedroom, and then I would clean for a week, so it was bad. It was like legitimately bad. And so I thought I'm the only one. And then as I started sharing anonymously, but therefore very honestly, because I wasn't
totally,
nobody knew it was me. People were like, oh, this is how I think. This is how my brain works. These are my rationales on why it is that I skip it for this, whatever. All these things I was saying, people were relating to it. And I was like, really? I'm not the only one. And so over time, it kind of shifted into, now I do that for other people. Like, I'm like, listen, I don't enjoy telling the world how much I struggle with clutter and what my look like. I mean, that's not fun to talk about, but people need to know they're not alone. That's probably the number one thing I hear from people, is they're like, I am finally able to make progress because I finally know I'm not just broken.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because you were sharing anonymously, so you were able to share honestly. Oh, that's so fascinating that that's how it all started and how it all came to be. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really cool origin story, I guess. Like, that's because social media now, I don't know how it was then, but like now I don't vlog. I'm a YouTuber and I don't vlog because I'm like, oh my God, I have to clean up my house before I do that. I'd rather just have like this kind of area in my house that's clean that right here, this is where I do it. So you can kind of see there's like not a lot around me, but
Yeah.
like, or if you're on Instagram stories, it's like, oh, what's going to be in your background? Like so what you're seeing of other people's houses is just not the reality of what's going on typically.
Right. And the timing was different than it is now. I mean, Instagram wasn't a thing. Pinterest wasn't a thing. YouTube was just barely becoming a thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think what's happened in the last 13 years. But at that point, I mean, I showed pictures of my house, but I never showed a picture of my face. And I set up an email address so no one would ever trace it back to me.
Wild.
I thought,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like the first thing you need to do is start with your mindset if you're going to start decluttering?
No, I actually don't. Because I love to think. Like thinking is my favorite. Planning is my favorite. Figuring things out is my favorite, which is how I'm able to do what I do and write the books. But for all the years of thinking and planning and figuring out, my house didn't get any better. So before you ever worry about anything else, literally just grab a black trash bag. I mean, like start throwing trash away. I not even deciding that things are trash that you once thought were treasures. I'm not even talking about that. I am literally talking about no emotions, no decisions, nothing, just because that movement, as you start to do that and you're like, really, is this going to make a difference? I probably don't even have any trash. Just do it anyway. And as you do that, that's where your mindset starts to change. My biggest mindset change has been, that truly changed my house was to say, well, my goal is actually better. My goal is no longer to have this perfect home. My goal is to make this space better, which means I can literally throw away one thing and I have been successful. I cannot fail at better if I do anything at all. That's a huge mindset change. I didn't make that mindset change until I started the process and saw, oh, okay, I am doing something teeny tiny and it makes an impact, which then impacts my mindset, which then makes me willing to do more, which then makes me get away from this whole, I've got to set aside, 3 weeks or 5 years or whatever to change my house. And I'm like, oh no, I can make it better right now. Then my house actually started to change where all these years of me being like, okay, when am I going to do this? Oh, if I'm going to do this, I got to really think through what it's going to be like so I can use my time wisely, blah, blah, blah. My house never changed until that.
That's fascinating because you're right. Like you can do all of the self-help books. I can read all the decluttering books, but your book, I did start doing. I was halfway through it and I was like, oh, there's some trash. Okay, put that away. Oh, I get a little decluttering, put that away. And I wasn't even all the way through, but I just started like putting just the basic. I mean, everything that you share is just basics, but it's right. You're like, you think that it needs to be this like decluttering overhaul. And you're like, no, grab a bag and see if you've got any trash on your countertops. Done. Like, I love that.
Well, and mindset changes are very important. So I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying
totally, but there's a lot that you can do in your head.
Yeah. And there's and taking that physical action and seeing that immediate visible progress is what actually brings about the mindset change. Where so many times when you think, I've got to change my mindset. Okay, I've just got to really think about this differently. And I sit there and I think and nothing actually changes.
Spot on. Yeah, that's so interesting. Not the answer I was expecting, but I love that answer. So I read your book and you give so many tangible ways to declutter. Can we start with your container concept? Because that also was just like mind melting, but just so basic. And that's why I feel like you're so good at this is it's like, you're not giving these life hack lessons. You're giving this like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to follow this. So let's talk about the container.
I feel like what I do is just explain reality.
Yeah.
I'm like, and so sometimes I go, this is so embarrassingly simple, and like,
yes.
And but it was such a mind blowing moment for me when I was like, containers are meant to contain. And because I was know, right?
But
I thought they
really,
were for sticking stuff in,
Yeah.
and then you bought more containers and all that. And so when it was so shocking to me, like, oh, I didn't know this. This is the game changer for me. And because I was sharing that on my blog, people then were like, oh, what? You know, I'm writing it thinking, who doesn't know this? This is embarrassing, but you know what? This is what I'm doing. I'm sharing what I'm learning and stuff. And then other people were able to give me that feedback of, oh my word, I've never thought of it this way. So it's like that verified that this was valuable information to share. And so now it's one of the main things I teach. And I still get a little embarrassed sometimes because I'm like, I know that supernaturally organized people, because I've been told, they're like, oh, this is why when I was talking to either an organizing client or, you know, a friend, we were not talking about the same thing. Like I was saying, we'll just get containers. And they're like, I've gotten hundreds of containers and they're all shoved in that closet over there, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that, but the container concept is basically that containers are not meant to hold things. They are meant to serve as limits. And, you know, container contains, it's a boundary. And when I realized, oh, there's a limit. And if I want my house to be under control, it is not possible to keep all the things. You know, so it doesn't actually matter how much I love something, whether I might use it someday, if it has value. It only matters, does it fit in the space that I have? Like, that's it. And when I made that mindset shift, I realized, okay, it's not just bins and baskets that are containers. Every shelf in my home is a container. Every sock drawer is a container. So the sock, it's not the math of how many pairs of socks do I need. Let me take, you know, X is laundry day and Y is that, you know, I mean, like that's where my brain would go. Like we were talking about, I like to sit down and figure things out. Right.
Yeah.
And instead it's how much room is in my sock drawer? That's all I have, you know, and I put my favorite ones in first. And once it's full, then everything else has to go. And there's something about that that takes the pressure off of me to make these value decisions, because I see the value in everything and there has to be a limit. So letting these inanimate objects be the limit is very freeing for me.
Totally. Well, even I feel like a closet is a container, because if it's overflowing out of your closet and going onto that chair in your bedroom or the whatever, it's like, okay, I love putting the favorites in first, and then whatever doesn't fit. Yeah. And it is so basic, but you think like, okay, yeah, I mean, exactly. I'm just going to reiterate what you said, but that's it. Like, this is your limit. And that's a big, it's just such a good one. I watched the YouTube video on it too, and I was just like, what? This is gold. This is so good. We're going to take a brief break to talk about elimination communication. It's where you potty train your infant. If you are interested at all in doing this, it saves on diapers. It helped us with potty training. You can go to heyshayla.com/go diaper free pod, and it will bring you to the book that you can buy. If you want to buy the potty that they have or the padded underwear, so that when you are potty training, it doesn't just go everywhere, you can go to heyshayla.com/tinyundiespod. And it's the tiny trainers that are the padded ones. I have loved doing elimination communication. We usually don't start till like 6 months, but I felt like it was great for potty training and just for not having to clean up a really poopy diaper. It's easier to wipe a butt that's pooped into a potty. So there you go. If you're interested, heyshayla.com/go diaper free pod or heyshayla.com/tinyundiespod. Hey Shayla will be the code at all those places. Let's get back to the show. So what I loved about your book is that you don't need to put aside 3 hours to declutter your bathroom closet and to figure out everything, because I've got 2 children. I don't have 3 hours to do that. I'm not gonna, I could pay a babysitter for 3 hours to do that. Or I can go through your 2 questions that you ask every day as I'm like moving things around the house and get rid of stuff as I go. So let's go over the 2 questions that you go over in your book.
Yeah. So I have 2 decluttering questions. I've seen lists of like 15 questions before. I've seen lists of 15 questions, and I had too much stuff to ask myself 15 questions about things. Like if you have some family heirloom, maybe, but I was like, I can't do that. So I as I was working, like while working, not figuring it out ahead of time, like we talked about with the mindset thing, but as I was working, I started asking myself my first decluttering question, which is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? Okay. Because I had no trust in myself on organizing, right? Like so many times I'd gotten organized and then I couldn't find anything. So,
Yes.
I mean, that's everybody's story, right? And so I didn't trust myself on that. I was like, I don't know where things go. I don't know where to put things. So I was just like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. It's a definite fact-based answer. There's no decision that I'm making. I am asking, if I needed this, where would I look for it first? What's the instinct? Not trusting that it's going to be there, not having confidence that it'll be in this spot, but literally, if I needed this item, where would I look first? And then I let that be its home. And the key to that is that when I answer that question, I take it there right now. I used to make little piles of things because I thought that was more efficient, right? Like I thought, okay, if I make a pile of the stuff that's going to go upstairs, the stuff that's going to go to the garage, the stuff that's going to go to the kids' rooms, then when I'm done, I will go deliver all those things.
Of course.
But I had young kids at the time. I don't have young kids anymore. And I'm still as distractible, if not more distractible than I was back then, So it just was not reality that I ever really had a chunk of time without distractions. And so by taking things there now, when I get distracted, because it's going to happen, I have only made progress. I never have a bigger mess. That has become my main thing that I teach is it is possible to declutter without making a bigger mess. And it's the best way to declutter because you ultimately make more progress because you don't have anything half done.
Yes.
And that is everybody's biggest frustration with decluttering, right? Is every time I try to, declutter, I end up making a bigger mess, or it has to get worse before it gets better. It doesn't. If I will go ahead and act on these decisions, and I have ways to make the decisions with that first decluttering question, then I act on it. I take it there now. I get distracted. No big deal. The space is better than it was before. That's what changed my house.
Yes. And it's such a good one because when you are looking for something, that's how you get more things in your house. Cause you're like, oh, I thought we had a tape measure. We must not have a tape measure. And then 2 weeks later, you have 2 tape measures and you're like, "Ugh."
Or 7 tape measures.
Oh, right. So if they're where they're supposed to be, or at least where you would think to put them or to go look for them, that's the tip that I read when I started that I started acting on immediately. I read it in your book and I was like, genius, such a good thing. Like, oh, these scissors, they go in the junk drawer. Or this thing, where does this go? And and you said in your book, it's going to be different for every person. And that was one thing that I loved. You're like, the Easter egg basket was on the laundry room on the top shelf or wherever it was. And then your mom tried to help you and she moved it because that seemed like a logical place to find it. And then you couldn't find it anymore. And you're like, no, I knew exactly where it was. It doesn't matter where it is, just so that you know where you're going to go look for it.
And that's what's so hard is because sometimes you're like, well, but this isn't where my grandma kept hers. And my grandma's house was great. So I want to be like my grandma. But then you do things like that and you can't find anything. And that is the problem. Like you said, you go buy more because it's not, you can't find it. And that's extra frustrating. So it's like, put the scissors, in the laundry room if you need to. If that's where you look for them, then that's where they should be. Totally. And that's a lot of that self-acceptance of being like, it is better for me to do things in a way that actually work for me than for me to try to be like someone else and my house stay a disaster. So,
okay. And then what's question number 2?
Okay. So the second question, I only ask if I don't have an answer to the first question. So the first question is, where would I look for this first? If I ask myself that question and I'm like, then I ask myself, if I needed this item, would it occur to me that I already had one? Because I didn't have an answer to where I would look for it first, which ultimately means I wouldn't go looking for it. And that's hard because I need to be honest with myself and say, if I would never go looking for this item, I would either do without, which is great, fine, or I would go buy another one because it just wouldn't have crossed my mind that I already had one. So I didn't, wouldn't have gone looking for it. And sometimes people are like, oh, but I know I have it. I'm like, well, if you know you have it, there has to be a place where you would look for it first. So go back to that first question. But
Mm,
it really, that second question is just a way to, it's a reality check for me to just let things go, stick it in the donate box, even though it's hard because I'm being realistic about, that I would never go looking for it. And so it doesn't do any good for it to be in my house
totally.
if I would never look for it if I needed it. It's just taking up space and making it harder for my house to be able, to be managed by me.
Yeah. And there was a couple of things that I love too, is that you always have a donate box, which is what you just mentioned. And that's
Mhm.
something that I have too. And it's like when you're just done with it or you don't have a need for it anymore, you just throw in that donate box. And then when the donate box gets full, that's a task that you have to do, but at least it's kind of in one spot. And the other part that I loved was getting rid of the guilt of, because I have a friend who cannot throw anything out of her house. She's like, oh, there's somebody who I know that will need this. I'm sure I can find something. I can't just throw it away. I don't know the best place to donate it. Is Goodwill even a good place to donate to? And then everything stays in her house. So
Yeah.
kind of go through that process of how you let go of some of that.
Well, I let go of it because I unsuccessfully tried it all. I mean, like that's
Yeah.
why. I get it. I get her mentality. That was me. I can remember going through my kids' clothes, getting rid of the ones that were, outgrown or whatever, and having this elaborate system of these things were given to me, so I need to give those away. These things I bought at a garage sale, so I could sell these on eBay.
Oh my gosh.
These I bought at a garage sale, but they're not good enough quality to sell on eBay, so I could put these in a garage sale. Those are going to go. I mean, like,
Oh
I
no.
had such an elaborate system. And every time, what would happen? I would lay all these things out on the guest room bed, which we had at the time. We don't have that anymore. But I would lay all these things out, and then life would happen and I would come back and they were a big jumble, or I forgot what each pile was,
Yeah.
or I did put things in bags and set it by the back door and walked by it until my friend whose kid would have loved those clothes had outgrown them by this. I mean, like that,
Yeah.
that's how this works. So I know that mentality. And I
Mhm.
actually just recently in my Patreon group, we were talking and somebody was saying, they're like, the fact that you understand that mentality is the reason I'm willing to listen to you, because it is hyper overly logical, but it does make sense to the person who is so idealistic. That was me. I wanted to do the very best
Of
thing.
course. Yeah.
And so because I have done all that and because it failed miserably and my house was a disaster, when I hit rock bottom, I was like, that isn't working,
Mhm.
And so little by little, I was like, I'm just going to donate this. And I went, okay, it's just gone. I donated it and now it's gone. And I never
Mm.
have to think about it, look at it, move it,
Sell
remember to
it,
call some,
ship
remember to
it.
take it with
Yeah.
me, sell it, ship it, all that. I didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
And so it just freed me up. So the more that I donated, the more I went, oh, there's huge value in donating because it gets it out of my house. So like, and
Right.
I know people will say the thing of, oh, but you want to donate it to somebody who, it's going to be a great cause and all this kind of stuff. I mean, honestly, it could be a millionaire's for-profit business. I mean, like, and I wouldn't even care if they'll come to my house and pick it up, they can have it.
Yeah.
Like, because I see it as a service to me to take my junk,
Totally. Yeah.
just getting it out. But I've come a long way to be able to do that. So the thing I'll tell people, like in your friend situation, what I would say is, okay, then take action on one of those things that you're wanting to do. Take the action of, okay, you really want to give, the old towels to an animal shelter. That's awesome. Go do that. So many times, the time that it takes, or you get there and they say, you know what, we just had a huge donation. We don't actually have any room anymore. I mean, those kind of things happen to people all the time, right? And so you go through that process and you either realize, oh, that was not that hard, and then you're free to do it in the future,
Mhm.
or You go through that process and you're like, that was a ton of time. They were not nearly as proud of me as I was of myself when I brought it into the animal shelter. I mean, like, that kind of stuff, that's what goes through your mind. And you're like, not worth it. But as long as it's sitting in your house, that is that's what I had to tell myself. It doesn't matter what I do with it as long as it does not sit in my house.
Yeah.
And when I made that decision, then I was like, well, then I just want to get rid of it. So like I donate to whoever. I mean, of course, obviously I try to donate to good causes, but if the good cause can't pick my stuff up, then whoever wants to pick it up can have it.
Yeah.
I mean, like it just has to get out of my house, because I saw once the stuff was out of my house, I could handle my stuff better. And then I could do more idealistic things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't as overwhelmed in my home anymore.
Yeah. You're good at this. You are, because honestly, like
I've been talking about this stuff for a long time now.
Right. But that's such good advice to like, fantastic, go do it. Because sometimes it is that first hurdle of just like, okay, well, now I have to figure out where this place is. Oh my gosh, it's actually only a block from my house. Oh, I could drop it off on my walk when I walk this is way easier than I thought. Done. Yes. Now you can keep doing it. Or it's way too hard. I don't have the capacity to get that done. And that does not trump getting the declutter out of my house.
Yes.
Great. That's so good. We are going to take a brief break to talk about a company called Explore, IKSPLOR. They are a merino wool base layer company for kids and for women. I don't know if it's because my mom grew up in California, but I literally had no idea how to dress in the cold. So it was always miserable. I was always wearing 15 layers and always freezing. Lo and behold, that was my problem. If you wear a merino wool base layer, which is an investment, but it will get you outside and you will stay warm, which is a game changer. A merino wool base layer, then a fleece mid layer, then a waterproof exterior layer. That's it. That's all you need and you'll be warm. You can go to heyshayla.com/IKSPLOR pod. Hey Shayla will give you a discount. And if a code ever doesn't work, then you can go to heyshayla.com/codes and it will give you all the updated codes. Let's get back to the show. So the other book that you've written is How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. I have not read this book yet or listened to it, but you mentioned in the one that I did read that you have kind of like, or it seemed like that you have kind of daily habits that you do to kind of keep your house manageable. Mm-hmm. Can you share some of those?
Yeah. So when I first started, when I had no idea that I'd ever be teaching this stuff, I was literally at rock bottom. I was like, what is wrong with me? Why is this so hard? I don't understand why it is that everyone else can do this. And I was like, okay, I tried all the methods, all the, the books and stuff. And I was like, I don't know what to do. But I know that when I go to, clean my house once and for all, I spend all my day and all my energy catching up in my kitchen. And so I was like, I'm just going to do the dishes. I'm just going to do the dishes because other people don't seem to have sinks full of dirty dishes when I show up at their house unexpectedly, which I don't usually do that because I don't like people to do it to me, but I'm always amazed, when I'm like, oh, your house looks amazing. And you didn't know I was coming. This is crazy. But I especially was like, how do they not have dirty dishes all the time? And so I was like, I'm just going to focus on that. And so I, every day for 7 days or every day for really 13 years, not much. I did the dishes. And after about 7 days, I was like, oh, so like, I now understand there's this thing that I call dishes math, which is, I did not know how long it took today to do 1 day's worth of dishes. I thought doing the dishes was this huge, big job because it always was, because I always waited until I had to do the dishes, which was several days worth. And then I was always buying more dishes because I thought I didn't have enough, which meant I could go longer, which meant took longer. And, so I thought it was this huge job. But when I did them every day, I was like, oh, if I do the dishes every day, it takes like 10 minutes. Like I literally did not know that.
Yeah.
Which is embarrassing to say.
No, it's not embarrassing. I think that's the norm. I think that's whatever. Yeah.
But that's that mindset thing, right? Like we were talking about, I love thinking. So if I had, the way I thought about it was, I was like, how did people do the dishes every day when it takes me 4 hours to do the dishes after 4 days? days. And so that means they're spending an
Right.
hour every day. Who has an hour to do the dishes every day?
Totally.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
One day's worth of dishes is 10, maybe 15 minutes, even hand washing, so it's like that mindset. And then like, oh, but if I let it go 2 days, it's not just double that, it's an hour now.
Mm.
Because I'm shifting and I'm moving and it doesn't all fit in the sink, the one sink or whatever. And then 3 days worth of dishes is the hours thing. And so it's like, I had always had this mindset. I'm like, what is the point of doing maintenance things on a house that looks like my house looked like? It didn't make any sense. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. That's dumb. I need to get my house perfect and then it'll make sense to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
I never could do that. I mean, I would get my house perfect, with everything shoved in the master bedroom, but I would get it perfect. And I'd be like, this is what I want my house to look like. And I would be like, I'm going to relax. And then wouldn't pay any attention for a couple days. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh my word, it's worse than it was before. And so I didn't understand what was happening in those like 3-day periods between perfect and total disaster again. And so when I saw the impact of the dishes, I was like, okay. So I started adding tasks every week and I would just do them every day and I would focus on it and I would write about it. And I'd be like, this is why I'm resisting it. Oh, wow. This is so much easier, or this is actually harder than all these different things that I was talking about. So I boiled it down to the 4 most basic ones. And the 2 most basic ones are doing the dishes every day. Like if you don't know what to do the dishes. If you're completely overwhelmed, do the dishes. If you can't do anything else, do the dishes. Like if I will do that, it's shocking how it affects the entire house. Like it's just amazing.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And then the other one the 2 boiled down to the most basic is a 5-minute pickup. Do a 5-minute pickup. And 5 minutes is literally the least amount of time I could justify. Cause I was like, I know that people whose houses are under control do a daily pickup. But I had always said, okay, I'm going to start doing that. So for today, I need to get my house perfect, right? Because I need to pick it all up.
Yes.
Well, then I burned out and never actually got that done. And then it just
did it one day and you were like,
right,
that was too much.
Who does this?
Yes.
So I was just like, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. That's it. And I'm going to quit after 5 minutes. It is shocking the impact that 5 minutes of picking stuff up and putting it away, all the way away, not like setting it aside and then at the end of 5 minutes putting it away, but like really, truly, you're not going to finish, especially if your house is really, out of control like mine was, but it makes an impact. And doing 5 minutes every day, it's amazing the impact that has. And it's a great thing to bring your kids in on as well, because although there's going to be, they're going to pretend like their leg is broken and they've never what? No,
I don't even play with that. I didn't. We
keep what, where? Like they're just going to have all these things. And so it's not fun in the beginning when you're bringing your kids in on it, but it's so worth it, because I would say within a year or 2 of, making that a family thing, I have 5 people in my house. That's 25 minutes worth of picking stuff up and putting it away that happen at pickup. And it's like, oh, we can get the house back under control easily in 5 minutes, which I never would have thought that we could do. I mean, it takes practice, but we did definitely get there.
Totally. So that's kind of something that I've seen a lot is like, oh, do the nightly pickup so that when you wake up in the morning, you walk out to this perfectly clean house and whatever. And so I was like, yeah. I want to do that. But like, I put the kids to sleep and I am exhausted. So one thing that I started doing that I found so helpful, we have a timer for when she goes to take a bath or when the girls go to take a bath. And I'll be like, okay, 15 minutes. And then the timer's going to go off and then we're going to take a bath. Well, she's usually like watching TV or that's when I do my pickup. So it's my own timer of 15 minutes, get the pajamas on the bed, get the diaper on the bed, get the tub going and clean up the toys because it's the end of the night. The toys aren't coming out again. I'm going to put the dishes away and run the dishwasher so that while I'm putting them to sleep, it's moving. And so that 5, 15, 10 minutes, whatever it is, I do that exactly. And it's so helpful, but you're right. It does not take 3 days. It does to make a little bit of impact. So when I come out from putting them to sleep, I'm like, all right, I still have a little bit to clean up here and there, but like this feels better. It feels good. And I can kind of relax.
And even if you can't, like, even if it is a total, complete disaster zone, 5 minutes is worth it. 5 minutes is totally worth it. And so it's like, take it from me that even if you're like, that would be a 5-hour job, so I'm not going to do anything, just do 5 minutes. Just do that. And you will be shocked at the impact you can make in 5 minutes. Like, because I don't like to be tricked, right? Like, I don't like to have other people trick me, and I don't like to trick myself. I don't like to be like, oh, I'm going to do 5 minutes, but maybe I'll really do 30. I'm like, no, I really do mean 5 minutes. I actually mean 5 minutes. And it makes a huge impact.
And if somebody feels that way, I really think they should read the book, because I think seriously, because it is like, grab the black trash bag, grab this, and it's just things that you give such good tangible tips on, like getting started, just like starting the momentum. And that's I feel like your whole thing is just movement. Do one very, 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 very small thing. Drop off the towels to the Humane Society. Go to just getting some movement and starting to feel the changes. So because you're not the only person who's in your house. You've got a partner, potentially. You have roommates, you've got children, you've got different things. So this mess is might not even be only yours. And B, I don't know, like, what if your partner's not on board, or they are making the mess faster than you are? Do you have any tips for like how to work with that?
It's really not a what if. I mean, this is everybody's situation. And I think sometimes people are like, but my husband or wife or whoever I'm with is not as into decluttering as I am, or they're not as excited about it. I'm like, well, welcome to real life and relationships, right? Like, you're the one. I always say, I'm like, you're the one watching this woman who calls herself a slob comes clean. I'm like, you're the one into this right now. And so it's very normal for you to be the one, so I'm like, my number one piece of advice, focus on your stuff, focus on neutral stuff. It is so easy for me to see what my husband should get rid of. Like, duh, like what, that is useless, or, whatever, it's ruined, it's blah, blah. But if he was to say the same, and he has, because this is real marriage. I mean, like, if he says the same thing about my stuff, I'm like, but here are all the reasons why I love this thing, so it is very easy, and it's offensive when you have your own clutter and yet you're focused on theirs, right? So focus on your own stuff first. This is what I did. This was the gift of me I didn't even tell my husband that I had started doing this. Like, it was that big of a secret, and
my gosh,
because I did that, I did probably after 6 weeks, but because of that, I could only focus on what I was doing and my own stuff. And because of that, I saw, just me changing what I'm doing and me getting rid of my own stuff changed our house. And so get rid of your own stuff. It will change your house. I cannot guarantee it, but in the vast majority of cases, then other people will get on board because they see the impact that having less stuff makes on their lives and their home. They see, okay, you're not, because often people hold on tighter to stuff when you're telling them to get rid of it, right? Especially when you have your own stuff and it's like, I've got this huge log in my eye and I am so hyper focused on your splinter, whatever. I mean, like that. So that there, it's everything. Focus on your own stuff first. It will change your house to do that.
I think that when I started decluttering, it's way easier to get rid of his stuff. It's easier to get rid of his stuff than it is to get rid of my stuff. And he'd be like, where's this thing? And I was like, I don't know. So I love that advice to start with your own. I mean, you've got your 3 books. What is the third book? Organizing for the Rest of Us.
Yeah, that one, it's called a gift book. And so it has pictures, and it's basically like the strategies that are in the other books with lots and lots of words. It's in tip format with pictures, and then a lot of other just like quick tips and stuff. So it's like 100 tips or something. Yeah.
So like even more tangible, broken down.
Yeah, it's flip throughable. Yeah, it's flip throughable. It's in a different section of the bookstore. So like, it's a whole publishing thing they asked me to do. I was like, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. But then you also train other people to help decluttering coaches.
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to get more information. So if somebody wants more of you, what can they do? They can read your books. They could potentially get trained to be a coach, or you have a Patreon you mentioned.
I do. So I kind of do the message in all the different formats, so I started with the blog. I don't necessarily write on the blog very much anymore, but I do have a podcast. I have, through that, I have a Patreon group that is a lovely group of like supportive people who all talk with this language around decluttering, like we're all using these same strategies. I have a YouTube channel. I have the books and all that. And I came to a point where I was like, you know what? I've said all the words. I mean, I keep saying them. Don't worry. I keep talking. It's amazing how much I can talk, but, but I've taught it. So if somebody wants to learn this, all of that exists. Like they've got what they need to learn it. And yet there are those who need their hand held. They need someone to help them. And I don't have the capacity to do that with all the other work that I do as far as, creating the content. And so I started this coaching program, and we've got, I think we've had like 130 or something go through the training, and we've got like maybe 30 something certified coaches at this point. And, so they can do in-home or they can do online coaching, but it's just, I felt like that was the missing piece, to be able to help people with this. And I know how desperate people feel on this because that was me. So I'm like, this is the thing that allows them to do that. So
just clone yourself a couple of times to help even more people. Yeah.
And they're all their own people. I mean, they have their own businesses. They don't have to, but it's like, if they're listed on my site as a certified coach, then they've agreed to use my methods. If someone specifically asks them, and most of them do use my methods, but also it's for, people who are professional organizers, and they're like, I need to be able to communicate better with my client. I need to understand what it is that, where the miscommunications are happening, what it is that I'm saying that I think is obvious that they don't see it that way, so it's there for that as well.
Amazing. You're amazing.
I'm the translator between the person
the person who was born organizing and the person who
is naturally very disorganized.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I read your books, and I feel like your book, and I feel like I learned a lot even just in this conversation as well. But so thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. And I think a lot of people are I think like decluttering is very, I don't want to say trendy right now, but more and more people, I mean, maybe went for the minimalism like I did. And then we're like, okay, I have children. I need some things, but I just need also some mental space. And the decluttering helps so much with that. And your tips are just so tangible. And so I'm just so grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much for being on. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, please share with somebody you think would love. And I would be so honored if you would subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment and rating below so I can know what you guys are digging, what you want more of, just connect with you a little better. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.